It is no secret that our bodies go through a massive physical change when we are pregnant. We become a home to another human for 9 months, which comes with a lot of physical change. And while those changes can be really hard, some of the hardest physical changes actually occur in the postpartum period. Initially, these changes are new, they're uncomfortable, if not downright painful, and often you feel like your body is completely out of your control. We have massive hormone changes, including one of the most dramatic hormone shifts in the human experience. Our boobs are swollen and leaky. We're losing our body weight in blood and other fluids every time we stand up. We're sore, we're in pain, and for most of us, we look pregnant for days, weeks, if not months after giving birth. Add to this the external factors of being tired and weak and feeling like our body is again out of our control. And even after things settle, even after that initial postpartum period, we're still tired, we're still weak, and we're still in this body that we don't recognize. That's disorienting. Dr. Aurelia Athan states that matrescence is the disorientation and reorientation into our new life after becoming a mother. And if you haven't watched my video on matrescence yet, I will link that up here. I would encourage you to watch that first. But she's absolutely right. It is this disorientation from this person we once were to this new person we are becoming. And one of the main domains of change that we can experience in the matrescence period is physical. Dr. Aurelia Athan, again, Dr. Dana Raphael, and Nikki McCoon all state that one of the areas where we can experience the most change throughout the postpartum experience and our matrescence experience is the physical aspect. And we will have some physical change inevitably. No matter your delivery type, you will experience a physical change. And sometimes even adoptive parents and surrogate parents can experience physical changes, whether that's through inducing lactation or just the brain changes that can occur in those parents, as supported by research. We're going to experience those changes. Now, the impact that these changes will have on our matrescence experience is highly dependent on a lot of factors, like the extent of our change, our delivery type, our recovery, our support system, how we view these changes. Do we view them as empowering or do we view them as destructive? Our body image before we had our baby, among many other things. So in this video, we're going to talk about these changes you may experience. We're going to talk about how vast they are, and we're going to normalize them and try to put to bed this rhetoric that you're supposed to bounce back postpartum. And once you see all of these changes laid out, hopefully that will help you to give yourself a little bit of grace and to recognize that the idea that you should bounce back is ridiculous. And then we'll talk about how to reorient yourself into this new body. But before we jump into that, hi, my name is Sam, and I'm a matrescence educator and a passionate advocate of motherhood. I believe that you deserve to enjoy this. I believe that you deserve to be seen. And most importantly, I believe you deserve to find yourself through motherhood instead of losing yourself to it. So if this topic sounds interesting to you, please hit that subscribe button and let's jump into today's video on the physiological changes of postpartum and beyond. So according to research, there are 3 main periods of change throughout postpartum, and I would argue that there's 4. First being the acute phase, and this is within the first 24 hours after giving birth. Then there's the sub or early acute phase, and this is after that 24 hours for up to 2 to 6 weeks postpartum. And then there's the late phase, and this is 6 weeks postpartum to about 6 months after delivery. Then I would argue the 4th one is 6 months and beyond, because there are some changes that we experience that don't go back to normal, that we still have to deal with after that 6-month mark. So we're going to jump into that first phase, the acute phase. And again, this is highly variable because it's going to depend on the type of delivery that you have. But I do think it still has an impact on our matrescence experience. Even though it's very short-lived, the experience and the way that we're treated in those early motherhood days really does make an impact on how we feel about ourselves as a mother moving forward. So these changes can include an increased pulse and blood pressure, an increased body temperature, shivering, chattering, or sweating, and this can be exacerbated by any drugs that were used in the delivery. We have breast changes where we start to express colostrum, and we may have sore nipples from the early stages of nursing. We have cramping from uterine contractions. That shit has to go back to normal. Lochia and blood loss, pelvic floor injuries, physical weakness and exhaustion, and then various changes due to the type of delivery that you had, like an incision scar, being sore if you had a C-section. These are not all of the things that can occur in that postpartum period. These are just some. If I went into all of this, we would be here forever. But I want to make this as exhaustive as I can. Next, we move into the early acute phase. And again, this is 24 hours up to 2 to 6 weeks postpartum. And the first and most important thing that we're going to talk about here, in my opinion, is that hormonal shift. Like I said, this is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, hormonal shifts in the human experience. And I could do a whole video on hormones. Let me know if you want to see that, because these signaling molecules have such a ripple effect on our systems, our mood, and I think it's fascinating, especially when we're talking about the menstrual cycle and pregnancy and postpartum. Absolutely fascinating. So let me know if you want to see that in the comments. But in this initial early acute phase, we have a severe drop in progesterone and estrogen. Progesterone and estrogen increase dramatically when we're pregnant, and I'll put a graphic up here. They skyrocket. And then postpartum, in those first few days postpartum, they drop almost back to pre-pregnancy levels. And this drop has a really big impact on our mood. It can increase mood swings, anxiety, depression, sadness, irritability, and this is often referred to as the baby blues. And this usually lasts up to about 2 to 3 weeks postpartum. And if it persists, we may be looking at a postpartum mood disorder, and I would encourage you to seek help. But at the same time, our progesterone, I say that so much, oh my gosh, our estrogen and progesterone are dropping. We have prolactin and oxytocin rising. And prolactin is meant to increase lactation or induce lactation. And then oxytocin, as we know it, is the love hormone, and it increases bonding, and it also encourages or induces contractions in labor and in postpartum to help the uterus contract and then go back to normal. And we may see more cramping around breastfeeding as oxytocin is released around breastfeeding for bonding and to bring that uterus back to its normal state. However, you are not required to breastfeed in order to release oxytocin. Your body will still release oxytocin. Your uterus will still go back to normal. You will still bond with your baby even if you choose not to breastfeed. Another interesting fact about oxytocin is we make new oxytocin receptors, I believe, in our hypothalamus when we are pregnant, and that is partially why we have a hard time calming down if our baby is not calm. So if you have ever had your baby upset, someone else is trying to soothe them and they're like, they're fine, and you're like, but I'm not. That's why. I could go on this forever, but back to those physical changes. Again, we have that continued cramping for our uterus to go back to normal. We still have that blood and lochia loss up to 6 weeks postpartum. We have perineum soreness, which is our pelvic floor. So we have things like soreness, pain, and itching, especially if you had a vaginal birth, and especially if you had any tearing or prolapsing or any other birth injury. Ice packs and dermaplast will be your best friend. I'll link those down below. You may have C-section scar soreness and ab weakness along with that. Breast engorgement when your milk comes in, which can be very painful. We have restroom changes like hemorrhoids, constipation, and pain with urination. And then we have our physical appearance. We may still have a bump. We may have stretch marks, cellulite, increased body fat and body weight, acne, your girl, signs of fatigue, you're covered in baby juice, and we have those breast changes where our breasts are larger, nipples are larger, just in boobs we don't recognize. Also during this time period, we experience these brain changes that are fascinating to me. Our brains shrink over time, and there's other areas of the brain that become more activated, and computer algorithms can actually look at brain scans of women who have had babies and who haven't and predict which person has had a baby based on their brain scan, which I think is fascinating. And then we move into the late stage, and this is 6 weeks to 6 months postpartum. And starting off, we're back with the hormones. Our hormones are still not back to baseline until about 6 months postpartum. And this also depends on breastfeeding status. And if the symptoms of your hormone changes continue after, again, we talked about after those 3 weeks, but after 6 months, if you're still feeling a little off from what you felt before you had your baby, it would be worth talking to your doctor about a potential hormone imbalance. Some of these things can be situational and circumstantial. However, it could be a hormonal imbalance, and it's worth getting it looked at. We have those pelvic floor changes. We may still have enlargement, labial changes, pelvic floor dysfunction, incontinence, pain with sex, all things that, again, should be looked at. Some things may be like that forever. Other things could be helped with pelvic floor therapy, which is super important. I feel like everyone should be able to have access to pelvic floor therapy, but it's rarely, at least in the United States, it's reserved for extreme circumstances like really extreme prolapses and things like that. Our body changes that continue. Our body weight may still be increased. Our body fat percentage may still be increased. And when we really look at this in the realities of postpartum, it makes sense. We are inactive. We're spending a lot of time sitting and rocking baby. Our nutrition usually isn't on point. We don't have a lot of time and energy to put into that. Our sleep is usually irregular still. And so this is really normal. When we look at all of the things that lead to healthy body weight and fat loss, it's things like having your nutrition on point, getting good sleep, getting good hydration, being active, all things that are difficult to do in these postpartum days. We start to have hair loss around that 4 to 5 month mark for most people. This can also be dependent on breastfeeding status. We have acne. I started to get acne, honestly, when my son was about a year old. My acne started to get worse, but it was still a little worse postpartum. Skin discoloration, also me, things like melasma or darkening of the skin. I have these sunspots that got really great during my postpartum experience and pregnancy. We have stretch marks, cellulite, spider veins, breast changes, and we may still have signs of fatigue, and we may still have that ab weakness. If our ab strength has not got back a little bit back to normal, or we haven't had our abs come back together, we may have what's called diastasis recti, which is the separation of the rectus abdominis, your core muscles, at the linea alba, which is that connective tissue that keeps your rectus abdominis together. And throughout our pregnancy, our core has to expand, obviously, to house a baby, and that should come back to normal, but in a lot of cases it doesn't, and we still have this gap between the rectus abdominis, and that can lead to ab weakness. It can lead to some protrusion, and it's something that, again, can be helped with physical therapy, and there are a lot of exercises you can do at home, but it's really going to depend on the degree, and it's worth getting evaluated. And then we move on to those long-term changes, what I would consider stage 4, and this is some of that stuff that your body just doesn't go back to pre-baby. We can't erase the fact that you had a baby, and these changes may include those brain changes, pelvic floor changes, breast changes, skin changes like on our face, as well as loose skin, stretch marks, and then our hip width also can expand and not go back to normal, and our feet size. Our feet grow during pregnancy and often don't go back to normal. First of all, that's a lot. That is a lot. So let's take a second to just say, wow, you did that. And that's a lot. Your body does all of that on its own to support another life, and that is incredible. But holy shit, are you at the whims of a lot of things out of your control? And who in their mind thinks you are supposed to bounce back from that? So when we're navigating the changes in this domain, let's start by giving ourselves a lot of grace that you have been through a lot, and you deserve time to rest and recover and reorient yourself. The rhetoric that we should bounce back is like someone breaking their leg in a sports practice and then after getting put in a cast being told, all right, get back on the field, let's start getting you strong again. No, that person needs time to rest and recover and heal before they start reintroducing themselves back to the sport. So giving yourself that compassion, and research also supports the fact that if we look at our bodies with appreciation for what they've done and see these changes as a reminder of the incredible thing that is growing another human, that we're more likely to be content with them. However, I understand that that is easier said than done. I have been there, and I never want you to feel like I'm diminishing any real pain you may feel around this. It's hard to look at your body and see someone that you don't recognize. But I would remind you that everything that your body has done throughout pregnancy, again, was to support another life and to protect you. It might not be what you would have wanted, but your body is always trying to do what's best. It's always trying to keep you alive and healthy and well. And sometimes that looks like storing extra body fat. Sometimes that looks like widening our hips. Sometimes that looks like expanding our boobs so that we have room for milk for our baby. Not necessarily fun things, but all things that your body is doing with a purpose. So as we move into what do we do to reorient ourselves, I would encourage us to do 3 things. And this is not revolutionary. This is not patented. This is just something that I like to practice with a lot of areas of change. I'm sure I didn't make it up, but I call this the 3 A's. Acknowledge, accept, and act. Kind of sounds like AA, but we'll get into it. First, acknowledge. Look at that list that I gave you. I'll link a list in the description here, but look at that list and highlight or circle the things that you experienced, or make your own list. List all of the things that you experienced and the ways you changed throughout each of those phases of postpartum. Give yourself the credit that you went through a lot. Thank your body for what it did to you. Maybe that's writing a letter or just standing in the mirror and expressing your gratitude, and that even when it was hard, it was trying to take care of you, and it always is. So give it that gratitude, give it that thanks, and remind yourself of that fact that you've been through a lot and that this body is a reminder of the wonderful thing that you did. Step 2 is to accept. There are some things postpartum you can't change. Postpartum hair loss, your nipples looking different, your hips being wider, all things that you're probably going to have to accept are different and will be different for a while or forever. Some things we just have to accept for the short term, like that postpartum hair loss. Mine felt like it lasted forever, and it felt like forever. It was forever, but it has stopped. I'm 2.5 years postpartum now, and it has stopped. The time I was in it, I wanted it to stop so bad, but it wasn't going to stop. And so trying to make it stop before its time was fruitless. Same thing with wishing you had your pre-baby boobs back. You can't erase the fact that you nursed. You can't erase the fact that you had a baby. You don't have to love them. You don't have to love the way your boobs look, but you do have to accept them if you're unable to change that. You may be able to change that, and if you have the ability to change that and you want to do that, go for it. But if you don't, just wishing things were different is only going to create pain. Saying things like, they are what they are, it is what it is, and reminding yourself of the reason of my boobs were a source of food for my baby for 9 months, and I'm so grateful for that. Giving that purpose and that acceptance can provide a lot of healing and release a lot of the stress, anxiety, and pain around these changes. And then the last thing is act. What can you change? Is there anything on that list that you can start working to change at this point? I would encourage you to be very realistic about this and pick one thing and do one thing every day related to that one thing. Not 5 things, not changing 5 things, not doing 5 things every day, just one thing, and one thing you want to work on and one thing you're going to do about it, and do that consistently. And often this has a kind of ripple effect. Let's say you want to get back to your pre-baby weight. Maybe your one thing is going for a walk every day. When you go for a walk every day, that's going to help improve that brain fog. That's going to maybe help improve your appetite. It's maybe going to help improve your digestion. It might even help improve your skin. It could have a lot of ripple effects, but just doing that one thing consistently is going to make a huge difference. And I'm sorry, I go right to the physical. I've been a health and fitness coach for the last 10 years, so I have that as my frame of reference. But maybe it's mindset. Maybe it's getting back to getting out of that brain fog. And so it's meditating, it's journaling, all things that, again, can be helpful at improving a lot of different areas of your life. Maybe it's working on your skin and getting back to a regular skincare routine. I know that went completely to the wayside for me. Sorry, that's Hopper. And so washing your face every day, again, could improve a lot of other things, like the way you feel about yourself, like your stress levels, like your self-esteem, all of those things. But one little thing does add up and can make a huge difference. And trust me, I know this is hard. I'm the kind of, I want to do all the things all at once kind of person, but it never works out for me. And I know that. And I know that it doesn't work out for most people, having worked through behavior change with people over the years. So do that one thing, do it consistently, and that will be good enough. So that is it for today's video. If there's one thing you walk away from, I want you to acknowledge just how much your body has changed and how much you have done, and give yourself that compassion, those props, and that just kind of acknowledgement that you did that, and that is incredible. If you like this content, please make sure to head to welcome-mama.com for more articles and more resources. Also make sure to subscribe to this channel, share, like, comment, all of those things. You can find me over on Instagram, and as always, thank you for being here. Welcome, Mama. You deserve to enjoy this.